Hi, I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EA Worldview on Syria. How can you make the media's head explode? Have al-Qaeda fight al-Qaeda. Earlier this week, the Los Angeles Times had a most interesting turn of phrase to describe the latest conflict in Syria. It said that an extremist al-Qaeda group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, found itself in a fight which included a more moderate al-Qaeda group called Jabhat al-Nusra. Whoa! Extremist al-Qaeda versus moderate al-Qaeda? What's going on here? Well, what's going on is part of a bigger story in which this group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham, has found itself in an all-out battle with the rest of the Syrian insurgency, one which is losing. It just so happens that amongst those insurgents are an Islamist faction called Jabhat al-Nusra, one which had been put on the U.S. government's list of terrorist organizations in 2012. Now that's an obvious problem, because all of a sudden Jabhat al-Nusra is linked up and fighting alongside the supposedly good guys in the Syrian conflict, the Free Syrian Army, as well as the newly founded Islamic Front. So if Jabhat al-Nusra finds itself on the right side of the line, then it has to become moderate. But this opens up all kinds of possibilities. Does moderate al-Qaeda mean al-Qaeda Lite? Maybe, looking a bit more colorful and carrying, maybe less weapons? What about al-Qaeda 2.0 for the 21st century? Where it talks tough, but at the end of the day you can go out and have a drink with it? Non-alcoholic, of course. What about maybe al-Qaeda, but only on weekends? Just for a social occasion, and during the week, you're kind of like not quite al-Qaeda, but very acceptable. Maybe you could be social al-Qaeda. I can control it. Never before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Or maybe we could talk about, in fact, an al-Qaeda franchise, which is moderate. Not like your hardcore, oppressive guns and weapons al-Qaeda, but one which welcomes in the kids, has toys, maybe, what would you say, a little bit of a coloring book. Not with that Osama bin Laden guy, because, quite frankly, he's so extremist and so yesterday. All right, enough joking aside. What's going on here? The fact of the matter is that the media went in for a simple label of what was happening in Syria a few months ago. All of a sudden, when the insurgency became very complicated and very difficult, it simply said, oh my God, the moderates are losing, the extremists have taken over. Some of those media outlets, including the Los Angeles Times, went so far as to say that the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham was dominating the insurgency, even though that group had maybe perhaps 5% of the fighters that were opposing the Assad regime. In the past week, that narrative has exploded, both literally and figuratively, when ISIS was seen not to dominate the insurgency, but in fact was confronted by the 95% of the insurgency who, quite frankly, wanted to leave Syria. At that point, the easy narrative disappears, and the terms like more moderate al-Qaeda come into play. Fact is that al-Qaeda was always a diversionary term. There are a range of insurgents that have operated in Syria. Some are stronger, stricter in their religious beliefs. Some have foreign fighters within them. Many do not. The key story in Syria, the one that moderate al-Qaeda versus extremist al-Qaeda misses, is that for the first time in many months, that insurgency is likely to be coming together, led by the Islamic Front, and that for the first time in many months, an insurgency may be coordinating to face the Assad regime. Not extremist, moderate, weekend, less colorful, more colorful al-Qaeda. I'm Scott Lucas. This has been EA's Worldview on Syria.